Most people think, if your own family calls you a failure, they must have a reason. I used to believe that too. Until one night at dinner. My mom said it out loud, in front of everyone. Not as a joke. Not out of frustration. Like it was a fact. And what she didn't know was that I had something sitting in my pocket that could change that entire conversation in less than 10 seconds. My name is Ava Reynolds. And the night my own family decided what I was worth was the same night I showed them how wrong they were. The story actually starts a few months before that dinner. I was still living at home in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to figure things out the way most people my age do, balancing part-time work, figuring out what I actually wanted to do long-term, and dealing with that constant pressure that you're somehow already behind even when you're just getting started. From the outside, I probably looked like I didn't have a clear direction. I wasn't in a traditional college program anymore. I wasn't following the path my parents expected, and I wasn't constantly talking about plans the way they wanted me to. And that was enough for them to start forming an opinion. Especially my mom. She never said it directly at first. It was always small comments, things that sounded harmless if you didn't pay attention too closely. You should really think about your future. Other people your age are already ahead. You can't just keep doing this forever. At the time, I didn't argue with her. Not because I agreed, but because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't lost. I was just moving differently. While they were looking at what I wasn't doing, I was quietly building something they couldn't see yet. Late nights. Side work. Learning things on my own. Nothing flashy. Nothing I talked about at the dinner table. Because I didn't need validation for it. I just needed it to work. And slowly. It started to. Not in a way that anyone around me noticed, but in a way that changed everything for me. The only problem was, they were still judging me based on a version of me that didn't exist anymore. And I let them. Because sometimes, it's better to stay quiet. Until the moment actually matters. That night didn't feel different when it started. It was just another dinner. Same table, same routine, same kind of conversations that never really went anywhere. My dad was talking about work, my sister was on her phone half the time, and my mom was moving in and out of the kitchen like she always does, keeping everything together. I sat down, said hi, and for a few minutes, it all felt normal. But there's a point in conversations like that where something shifts. Not loudly. Not obviously. Just enough that you can feel it before you fully understand it. It happened when my dad asked me a simple question. So, what's the plan right now? He didn't say it in a bad way. It sounded casual. But I already knew what it meant. It wasn't really a question. It was an evaluation. I gave a simple answer. Nothing detailed, nothing defensive. Just enough to move past it. But my mom didn't let it move on. She stopped what she was doing, turned slightly toward the table and asked, "What do you mean, plan?" The way she said it wasn't curiosity. It was doubt. I could feel the attention shift toward me. My sister looked up for a second. My dad didn't say anything this time. And that's when it started turning into something else. She kept going. "You're not in school anymore. You don't have a real job." Each sentence was calm, controlled. But it was building. And the more she talked, the quieter the table got. Because everyone could feel where it was heading. I didn't interrupt her. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wanted to hear how far she was willing to take it. And then she said it. Clear. Direct. No hesitation. "You're just wasting time." There was a small pause after that. The kind of pause where someone could have stepped in, changed the topic, softened it. No one did. And then she added one more line. The one that actually stuck. "You're acting like a failure." Not loud. Not emotional. Just certain. Like she had already made up her mind. I didn't react right away. I didn't argue. I didn't even look upset. Because in that moment, I wasn't hearing it the way she expected me to. I was hearing it as a decision. A label she had already placed on me, without knowing anything about what I had been doing. And that's when I realized, This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was the moment everything was about to change. I didn't react the way they expected me to. No argument. No defense. No, you don't understand. Because the truth is, I had already had this conversation in my head 100 times. Just not like this. Not out loud. And definitely not in front of everyone. For a second, I just sat there, looking at my plate, letting the silence stretch a little longer than it normally would. Not awkward, just enough to feel it. Because moments like that tell you everything about the people around you. Who jumps in? Who stays quiet? Who agrees, without saying anything? My dad didn't say a word. He just kept eating, like if he stayed out of it, it wouldn't involve him. My sister glanced at me, then back at her phone. And my mom, she looked completely certain. Like she had just said something obvious. Something that didn't even need to be questioned. That's what made it different. It wasn't frustration. It was a conclusion. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. They weren't waiting to see what I would become. They had already decided what I was. A failure. Based on what they could see. Not on what I had been doing when they weren't watching. I leaned back slightly, finally looking up at her. Not angry. Not emotional. Just steady. Because for the first time in that conversation, I wasn't trying to be understood. I already knew they didn't understand. And honestly, that worked in my favor. Because everything I had been building over the past few months, every late night, every small win, every step forward, had happened without their approval, without their expectations, without their constant opinions shaping it. They had no idea. And that gave me something they didn't have in that moment. Control. I reached for my glass, took a small sip of water, and set it back down like nothing had happened. From the outside, it probably looked like I didn't have a response. Like I was just going to sit there and take it. But inside, I had already made a decision. Not to argue. Not to explain. Just to show them. Because explaining would have turned it into another debate. Another conversation they could control. Showing them would end it. And that's when I felt it. That shift. That moment where everything slows down just enough for you to realize. This isn't going to stay the same. Not after what happens next. I didn't rush it. That's the part people don't expect. Moments like that don't need speed, they need timing. I let the silence sit for a second longer, like I was actually thinking about what she said, like maybe I didn't have an answer. Then I reached into my pocket. Slow. Natural. Nothing dramatic. My phone was already there. I unlocked it without saying anything, scrolled for a second, and turned the screen toward her. Not aggressively. Not like I was trying to prove something. Just calmly. Take a look, I said. That's it. No explanation. No build-up. Just those 3 words. At first, she didn't move. Like she wasn't expecting anything real to follow what she had just said. Then she leaned forward slightly, glanced at the screen. And paused. It wasn't a big reaction. Not right away. But I could see it in her face. That small shift when something doesn't match what you thought you knew. My dad looked over next. Then my sister. And suddenly, the same table that had been so quiet a minute ago felt completely different. Because now there was something in front of them. They couldn't explain away with opinions. Numbers. Clear. Real. More than they expected. More than I had ever talked about. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, the conversation stopped being about what they thought I was. And became about something they hadn't seen coming at all. My mom straightened up slightly, still looking at the screen like she was trying to process it fast enough to keep control of the situation. How did you? She started. But she didn't finish the sentence. Because she already knew the answer wasn't going to fit the version of me she had in her head. And that's when it hit them. Not all at once. But enough. They didn't know what I had been doing. They didn't know how far I had already gone without them. And everything they had just said didn't line up anymore. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Not because they didn't have something to say, but because whatever they were about to say Wasn't ready yet. You could feel it at the table. That shift. The same people who were so certain a minute ago suddenly weren't anymore. My mom looked at the screen again, then back at me. Not the same way she had before. There was something different now. Not respect exactly, but uncertainty. And that alone changed everything. My dad leaned in a little more, like he was trying to understand what he was actually looking at. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. Not accusing. Just trying to catch up. I didn't answer right away. Not to be difficult. Just because I didn't owe them a rushed explanation. Long enough, I said. Simple. Controlled. And that was enough to make it clear. This wasn't something I figured out yesterday. This wasn't luck. This was something I had been building quietly. While they were still deciding what to call me, my sister finally put her phone down. Now she was actually paying attention. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was changing the entire dynamic at the table. My mom tried to regain control of the conversation. You could hear it in her tone. "Well, that's good, but that doesn't mean." She stopped mid-sentence. Because whatever she was about to say didn't sound right anymore. Not after what she had just seen. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't about convincing them. That part was already done. The only thing left now was what they were going to do with the fact that they were wrong. I leaned back slightly, not in a defensive way. Just relaxed. Because for the first time in that entire conversation, I wasn't the one being evaluated anymore. They were. And they felt it. I didn't push it further. That's the part that surprised them the most. Because they were waiting for something. An argument, a speech, some kind of "I told you so." I didn't give them any of that. I just picked up my phone, locked it, and placed it back on the table. Calm. Like nothing had happened. But everything had. My mom tried again, softer this time. "You should have told us," she said. Not in the same tone as before. Now it sounded more like she was trying to figure out where she had missed something. I looked at her for a second. Not angry. Just honest. "I didn't need to," I said. That landed differently than anything else I had said. Because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. It was simple. And it was true. They didn't include me when they decided what I was. So I didn't include them when I proved them wrong. My dad leaned back slightly, exhaled, like he was finally accepting that the conversation wasn't going to go the way he expected. "You could have said something," he added. And maybe I could have. But that wasn't the point. "I was going to," I said. I paused for a second. Just enough. Just not like this. That was the closest I came to explaining it. Because if I had brought it up earlier, it would have turned into another conversation where they questioned it, doubted it, tried to shape it into something that made sense to them. And I didn't want that. I wanted them to see it. Without filters. Without opinions. Just reality. And now they had. The table stayed quiet again, but this time it wasn't the same kind of silence. Before, it was judgment. Now, it was adjustment. They were recalibrating. Trying to fit this version of me into the one they had already decided on. And it wasn't working. I stood up slowly, not in a dramatic way, just like the conversation had naturally come to an end. "I'm not lost," I said. One sentence. Clear. Then I grabbed my plate and walked toward the kitchen. Not waiting for a response. Because I didn't need one anymore. The rest of that night didn't turn into anything dramatic. No arguments. No raised voices. Just a different kind of quiet. The kind you don't get often. The kind that comes when something has already been said. And there's no easy way to take it back. I finished in the kitchen, rinsed my plate, and stayed there a little longer than I needed to. Not because I was avoiding them. Just because I didn't feel the need to go back to the table right away. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about how they saw me. I already knew. And now, they were the ones trying to catch up. When I walked back in, everything looked the same on the surface. Same table, same people, same house. But it didn't feel the same. My dad was quieter than usual. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful, Like he was replaying the conversation in his head, trying to connect it with everything he thought he knew before. My sister actually looked at me this time. Not casually. Properly. Like she was seeing something she hadn't paid attention to before. And my mom, she didn't say anything, which, for her, said a lot. Because she's not someone who stays quiet when she believes she's right. That silence wasn't agreement. It was adjustment. And that's how I knew something had shifted. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough. Enough for them to realize that whatever version of me they had been holding on to was outdated. That night didn't fix everything. It didn't suddenly turn into support or understanding or some big emotional moment where everything changed at once. That's not how it works. But it did something more important. It changed the direction. Because once someone sees something real, they can't go back to pretending they didn't. And from that point on, every conversation was going to be different. Whether they admitted it or not. Looking back at that night, the part that stayed with me wasn't what my mom said. It wasn't even the word failure. It was how easily it came out. Like it had already been decided, long before that dinner ever started. And I think that's what people don't really talk about. It's not always the loud arguments or the obvious moments that define things. Sometimes it's the quiet assumptions. The labels people place on you when they think they understand your life better than you do. For a while, I used to feel like I had to explain myself. Prove that I was doing something. Show progress in a way that made sense to everyone else. But that night changed something for me. Because I realized, not everyone deserves to understand your process. Some people only understand results. And that's okay. That doesn't make you wrong. It just means you're moving in a way they haven't seen before. I didn't become successful overnight. I didn't suddenly fix everything in one moment. But I did something more important than that. I stopped letting other people decide what I was worth, based on what they could see on the surface. And once you do that, everything changes. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to move differently. Enough to think clearly. Enough to stop waiting for someone else to approve your direction. So if you've ever been in a situation where someone looked at your life and decided what you were without really knowing anything about it, maybe the answer isn't to argue. Maybe it's not even to explain. Maybe you just let the results speak. Because when they finally do, you don't need to say much at all.